Inside this 5,600 square meter warehouse in Murchison, Texas, there's a manufacturing boom underway. Workers here, the beneficiaries of a conflict raging 9,600 kilometers away. These men aren't building weapons, but emergency bunkers that will eventually be buried deep underground, a secure shelter from almost anything that transpires up above.
This is how we finish it out here in the factory before we take it out in the field and deliver it.
Gary Lynch is the general manager at Rising S Company, one of America's top builders of doomsday bunkers. He says orders have flooded in since the conflict in Ukraine began in February. In a period when he would have sold about 6 shelters,
take a look under here.
He says he sold 35. And while sales in the past were mainly driven by fears of an economic collapse, many of his new clients are voicing one major concern.
It seems like this time around is because of a nuclear event. I'm getting people to call that have never even thought about a bunker. You know, maybe even people that never even realized that they even existed.
Russia has the world's largest nuclear force. The U.S. is the second largest. The fear of such weapons has been flowing since the conflict began.
The surveys that I've done.
But Michael Mills of the University of Kent, whose research centers on doomsday prepping, says it's rarely just one trigger that pushes people to such extremes.
Most people who undertake prepping can really name 8 to 10 scenarios, perhaps upwards, of things that they might be concerned about, which actually makes it quite harder to judge whether it is justified or not.
Americans have been down this road before, most notably during the Cold War.
Well, folks, I'm glad you could come down to see my fallout shelters.
When the government encouraged Americans to build their own fallout shelters. Today, the nature of preparedness is different, Mills says, often a reflection of distrust in government, which makes it difficult for leaders to calm nerves. It also doesn't help, he says, that the conflict is playing out in real time on social media, making a battle on another continent feel incredibly close.
Those images of war-torn Ukraine being beamed directly into living rooms with constant updates have a role to play in making kind of unimaginable disaster seem very, very imaginable or realistic.
Back in Texas, the work continues. The shelters being constructed on this day, Lynch says, are headed to Nevada, North Dakota, and Georgia. But some are also destined for overseas. And while no bunker could survive a direct hit from a nuclear bomb, he says they can provide protection from the fallout.
You're going to have things like dust, pollen, bugs, everything else, like that in the air is going to be radioactive. So that's what you need protection from. The shelters will have an NBC air filtration system that'll filter out those particles.
These shelters are designed to last up to 150 years.
The hope, of course, is that bunkers like these will never have to be used, that diplomacy can triumph over disagreements, even between enemies. But it's the just-in-case scenarios that are keeping some American consumers worried enough to go underground. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Murchison, Texas.